They had said the war was lost, that the young wolf had fought bravely, but the South was too cunning, too rich, too cruel. But Robb Stark had learned, and more importantly, he had changed. The moment came at Harrenhal. Rumors spread that Catelyn had freed the Kingslayer, and the men grumbled. But Robb did not lash out. He didn't let anger take him like his father once might have. He listened, not to lords, not to knights, but to the men who bled for him. He knew that honor alone wouldn't win this war. So he began to fight like a wolf instead of a boy raised in Winterfell. He made a pact with House Blackwood and took River Run with stealth rather than siege. The Lannister host that marched to retake it found themselves ambushed, not in the open fields they preferred, but in dense, shadowed woods where northern archers perched like ghosts. It was the first real victory after months of stalemate. Tywin Lannister underestimated him. He had always assumed Robb would make one more honorable mistake, that he would try to treat war like it had rules. But this time, Robb had sent Roose Bolton not to hold Harrenhal, but to burn it. Inside were Lannister supplies, captains, and even hostages. He gave Roose one order: no survivors. Bolton, of course, enjoyed such tasks. Then came the moment that changed everything. Catelyn was not imprisoned for freeing Jaime. Instead, she was sent north to rally the bannermen still hesitant to commit. Robb knew if he was to beat the Lannisters, he needed every sword. He would not have the phrase. Walder's insults were too many, and Robb refused to crawl. So he chose a different path. He rode to the Vale. Lady Lysa, cold and paranoid as she was, agreed to meet him only under strict terms. No more than 20 men, no swords drawn, and no sudden movements. But Robb didn't go to beg. He went with Sansa's letter in hand, the one she had secretly sent with Brienne, exposing Joffrey's cruelty, the lies about Ned, and the Lannisters' crimes. Lysa wept. She didn't love Robb. She didn't trust anyone. But she hated the Lannisters more than she feared war. And the Vale's knights, silent, proud, and eager for glory, finally took flight. They marched under Robb's banner, not for him, but for revenge, with the Vale and the Riverlands. At his side, Robb marched on King's Landing. It wasn't a siege, it was a storm. Tywin had marched west to defend the Westerlands from Ironborn raids. Another distraction Robb had planned. Balon Greyjoy had died, but his bastard son, a cruel and mad creature named Ramsay, had made deals with the North. Robb knew he couldn't trust him, but he didn't need to. He just needed the chaos. The Golden Company never came. The Tyrells delayed their support, and Tyrion, clever, tired, unsure of who the enemy even was anymore, made one final mistake. He opened the gates too late. By the time Robb entered King's Landing, the Red Keep was in flames. The city had torn itself apart. Loyalists fought each other in alleyways. The High Septon had been executed by Cersei's hand after preaching against her sins. Jaime Lannister was missing, and Joffrey, the boy king, was dead. No one truly knew how. Some said Sansa did it. Others whispered it was Tyrion, but when Robb entered the throne room, it was empty. The Iron Throne stood cold, untouched, its blades stained with soot and ash. He sat on it not with triumph, but with dread. The war was over, but peace would not come easy. In the weeks that followed, Cersei was found in the crypts, half mad, clutching. Tommen, like a mother lion protecting her last cub. She screamed Robb's name and spat blood when they took her. Tyrion vanished. Some said Varys helped him escape. Robb offered the crown to Stannis, who refused it unless Robb would kneel. He wouldn't. Instead, he called a great council. And that's when things began to truly unravel. Because you can win the war. But that doesn't mean the game is over. The Great Council gathered in the scorched halls of the Red Keep, its banners still stained with the ash of rebellion. Lords and ladies from all corners of Westeros arrived, some out of loyalty, others out of fear, and many just to survive. They didn't see Robb Stark as a king, not truly. They saw a wolf draped in a lion's skin, seated on a throne not meant for him. The tension was thick. Stannis Baratheon sat stone-faced, his fingers twitching against the hilt of Lightbringer. Beside him, Ser Davos watched the room like a man, expecting knives from every direction. The Tyrells came late, their banners high, their words careful. Margaery smiled, but her eyes were calculating. Her father, Lord Mace, spoke too loudly, as if shouting would force respect. And the Martells? They didn't come at all. Dorne had no love left for the throne that murdered Elia. They sent a raven, not a prince. But Robb did not flinch. He addressed them without ceremony. The war is over. The Lannisters have fallen. Joffrey is dead. The North bled for justice. And now I ask you, what will this realm be? He proposed something unthinkable. Not another king, not a new dynasty. He offered them choice. Let the kingdoms rule themselves, but stand together in peace. The North will remain independent. The Iron Throne need not exist. We can build something better. A few murmured in agreement, more sneered in silence. Stannis stood. There is law, boy, and by law I am king. You wear a crown stolen through blood and chaos. Robb didn't argue. He simply met his gaze and said, "And how did your brother wear it?" The room froze. Even the candles seemed to dim. Then Varys spoke, slinking from the shadows like a ghost. "There is another matter, one that may complicate this council." And with that, the room was changed forever. Varys stepped aside and revealed the girl, tall, silver-haired, eyes like molten amethysts. Her face was sunburnt, her armor foreign, but the sigil she wore, the three-headed dragon, was unmistakable: Daenerys Targaryen. Whispers turned into shouts. Lords from the Reach and Westerlands recoiled. Some screamed treason. Others looked at her like salvation. Robb's expression didn't change. He studied her as she stepped forward, quiet but steady. She didn't address the room. She looked directly at him. "I have dragons," she said, "and I want the throne." It was not a threat. Not quite. But it wasn't diplomacy either. Robb stood, his voice calm. "And I have the realm." The next days were a whirlwind. Councils turned to arguments. Alliances cracked. Old loyalties twisted. Daenerys had sailed from Essos the moment she heard Joffrey was dead. Her army waited outside the city walls, unsullied, Dothraki and her 3 dragons. She had not attacked. Yet, she met with Robb privately, just once. Their meeting was cold. He offered the North its freedom. She offered him one of 2 things, submission or war. He refused both. "I don't want your throne," he told her, "but I won't give it to someone who doesn't know this land. And I won't take it from someone who doesn't understand power," she replied. The tension between them became the fire in every chamber. Rumors spread that Daenerys planned to burn the Red Keep if the council didn't declare her queen. That Robb was planning to abandon the capital and return north with what he had won. That Tyrion, now Daenerys' advisor, was feeding her every secret, but none of that mattered when the murders began. First, Lord Merryweather was found in his chambers, throat slit. Then Lord Tarly, roasted alive in his tent, Dragonfire suspected. And, finally, the worst of them all, Ser Davos, found hanging from the battlements of Maegor's holdfast. A note on his chest: "Traitor to flame and realm." Robb lost his temper. For the first time since the fall of King's Landing, he ordered the gates shut. No one was to leave, no one was to come in, and then, to the horror of many, he arrested Daenerys. It wasn't fear that drove him. It was something worse. He knew what she would do if she left that castle. She would burn the world. And in her eyes, he saw that she already had. The dungeon beneath the Red Keep was cold, but not quiet. Chains clinked in the dark, like whispers of old ghosts, and the walls sweated with the damp breath of secrets. Daenerys Targaryen sat behind the bars, not with the rage of a queen betrayed, but with the eerie calm of someone waiting for the fire to come. Robb stood outside her cell, flanked by grey wind, whose growl echoed like thunder in the stone corridor. The young wolf didn't speak at first. He only watched her. "You would have burned it all," he said finally, his voice low. "The council, the city, the children sleeping in the streets." Daenerys looked up, her silver hair tangled, eyes sharp as ever. "If that's what it took to break the wheel, yes." He turned away, his jaw clenched. She went on, her voice cold. "I freed slaves across the sea while you played lords and banners. I know what justice is, Robb Stark. You just inherited vengeance." He faced her again. "And what would you have? Done with the throne, rule it like Meereen, with fear, with fire?" She stood now, stepping close to the bars. "You sit on a pile of ashes and think yourself better than me. But you put me here not because I'm dangerous, but because I reminded you of yourself." Silence stretched between them. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. That night, the Red Keep shook. A roar split the sky, louder than any storm. Drogon, he circled the capital like a predator, sensing his queen's distress. The people below panicked. Bells rang, torches lit the rooftops, archers rushed to the battlements, but no one dared fire. Robb knew he had hours, maybe less, before Daenerys' army made its move. Tyrion came to him in the war room, face pale, eyes hard. "You've made your choice," he said, "but if she dies in that cell, you lose more than a war. You lose every ally with a conscience." Robb nodded, but his eyes stayed on the map. "The conscience of Westeros hasn't done much for the people under it." Tyrion sighed. "You're becoming what you hated. And you're still pretending to know what honor is." The argument died there. The hour was too late for words. Outside, Daenerys' forces gathered. The Unsullied stood silent, perfect in formation. The Dothraki were restless, gripping their blades and stamping the ground like wild horses ready to stampede. Drogon landed atop the ruined sept of Baelor and let loose a shriek that sent birds scattering into the stars. Jon Snow arrived at dawn. He rode hard from the north after hearing whispers of what had happened. The moment he entered the gates, the city shifted. Lords who had kept their loyalties quiet now stepped forward. Some looked to him as a compromise, a Stark by name, but with Targaryen blood. A man who might unite them. He sought Robb first. The reunion was cold. "I thought you were dead," Robb said, his voice tight. "I was," Jon answered, "and now I find you've arrested the Dragon Queen. Are we to burn the rest of her army too?" "I'm not burning anyone," Robb snapped, "but she would." "And how do you know that?" Jon pressed. "Did you ask her, or did you fear her before she could even act?" Robb didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, he looked down at the map again. "You saw what happened in Meereen, in Astapor. She rules by fire." "She ruled by freeing people," Jon said. "You rule by fear now. What happened to the boy I called brother?" "He died in the twins," Robb said quietly. "He died before he learned what ruling costs." Jon left without another word. That night he went to see Daenerys. They spoke in whispers. She told him of her dreams, of a throne made of fire, of ash falling from the sky, of dragons crying her name in a language she didn't know. "I came to save this place," she told him, her voice breaking. "I didn't come to be chained like an animal." Jon nodded. And when he left, the guards didn't see what he took, an old key left by Tyrion. The next dawn broke blood red. The city awoke to fire. The dungeons were empty. Daenerys was gone. And above the Red Keep, Drogon flew once more, this time with fire not just in his mouth, but in his heart, because she was free and the war was not over, not yet. Smoke rolled over the city like a second dawn, thicker than mist, darker than cloud. The Red Keep's towers vanished beneath it, their shadows stretching long across. The waking streets, the people of King's Landing had seen war, they had seen fire, but they had never seen fear quite like this. Drogon flew above, wings slicing the sky, his roar splitting stone and heart alike. He did not breathe fire, not yet, but he circled as if waiting for a single word. One command. Robb Stark stood, on the battlements, armor ash-stained, cloak torn. Beside him, grey wind paced with a low growl rumbling in his throat. Robb's eyes scanned the sky, the city, the unsullied in their ranks below. The Dothraki mounting their horses, screaming war cries in a tongue he didn't understand. She was free. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated them all. Tyrion came running, cloak flapping like torn parchment, his face pale and glistening with sweat. "She's gone. You know what that means." Robb nodded. He felt the weight settle into his chest like a stone. "You think I don't know? You think you still have time?" Tyrion snapped. "You chained a dragon and left its rider to rot, and now she's loosed. Whatever peace you hoped for, it's ash now." Robbie turned to him. "And what would you have me do? Kneel? Bend the North again to a throne it never wanted? Let her rule through fear just because her dragons make her untouchable? No," Tyrion said coldly. "I want you to stop pretending you're not just like her." The silence between them cracked like a whip. Down in the city, Daenerys walked through. The gates. No armor, no crown. Her hair loose, her eyes burning with something deeper than rage. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The Dothraki saw her and raised their blades. The Unsullied drew formation behind her. The city trembled. In the throne room, Jon Snow waited. He had come before the dawn. He stood alone in front of the Iron Throne. What remained of it? The room was half rubble now, sunlight spilling through the broken ceiling, melted swords, scorched stone, shattered windows. Daenerys entered like a storm held in flesh. "You freed me," she said. "I did," Jon replied. "Why?" He took a long breath. "Because I still believe you came here to change the world, not burn it." She stepped closer, slow, silent. Her boots echoed on the cracked floor. "And if the world won't change unless it burns?" He looked down, then up again, meeting her eyes. "Then we were never meant to rule it." She stopped inches from him. Her voice softened. "You're a Targaryen, Jon. You belong in fire, not in snow. Don't let him take that from you." "You don't know what I belong in," he said, quieter, "but I know what I won't become." Outside, the bells began to ring. Not in surrender, in warning. Robb had ordered the Red Keep evacuated. Every remaining noble, every servant, every guard. The last ones left were warriors and wolves. At the base of the keep, grey wind howled. He sensed what was coming. Daenerys stepped toward the throne now, touched it. Her fingers traced its edge, the steel still hot from years of blood. Jon's hand hovered near the dagger at his side, but he didn't draw it. Not yet. Robb entered the throne room, flanked by Northmen. Arya was at his side now, having returned under cloak and shadow. She had seen enough of Daenerys' army in the streets to know one thing. They weren't waiting. They were preparing. "This ends now," Robb said, sword unsheathed. "Surrender your army. Go back to Essos. You're not queen here." Daenerys turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "I crossed the world to sit on this throne. I freed cities, broke chains and buried tyrants. I won't be told to leave by a wolf in a lion's den." "You didn't win," Arya said, stepping forward. "You escaped." Daenerys' eyes narrowed. "And you, what are you? A little girl with a knife?" Arya's face didn't move. "The last time a queen underestimated me, she choked on her own blood." The tension shattered in an instant. Drogon shrieked from above, sensing the threat. Jon shouted, "Stop!" But it was too late. A fireball tore through the roof, smashing stone and melting steel. Drogon's breath carved a hole in the side of the Red Keep. The throne room exploded in light and flame. The Iron Throne itself, caught in the blaze, began to melt, and in that inferno, Robb and Daenerys charged at each other, not as king and queen, but as fire and ice colliding. The realm would never be the same, never be the same. The Red Keep burned like the last candle at the edge of a storm. Flames licked the throne room, devouring its history, the banners, the tapestries, the bones of the past. Stone cracked and steel ran like rivers. Outside, the bells had stopped, ringing. There was nothing left to warn. Inside the inferno, it was chaos. Robb charged through the smoke, armor scorched, sword drawn. Daenerys moved like a phantom, her blade catching the firelight, her eyes unblinking even as embers fell like red snow. Neither spoke. There was no time. No words left that hadn't already burned. Arya darted through the shadows, her face streaked with soot. She searched for an opening, a breath, a heartbeat, where the queen might be vulnerable. But Drogon screamed again, and the blast that followed knocked her backward, her head cracking against the stone floor. Darkness pulled at her. Edges. Jon stood frozen, halfway between blood and fire, watching the people he called family destroy each other. "Stop!" he roared, voice drowned by flame. Daenerys slashed first, a quick, elegant move aimed at Robb's chest. He parried, barely. The force of it drove him back, and his foot slipped on melted iron. She didn't wait. Another swing. Another. Near miss. Robb was fighting to survive, not to kill. "Daenerys," he shouted, sweat and ash pouring down his face. "You're not this. I am what you made me." She screamed, lunging forward. Her blade grazed his arm, a searing line of pain. Robb gritted his teeth and shoved her back. She stumbled, but caught herself breathing hard. "I spared you," he said, voice hoarse. "I gave you a chance." "You caged me," she hissed. "You feared me, like they all did. And now they all will," she added, stepping toward him, fire swirling behind her. Robb looked into her face. Not the face of a ruler, but a woman undone by prophecy, by fire, by loss. This wasn't justice. This was vengeance in a dress of silver. Then Arya was behind her, silent, blade raised. But Daenerys turned too fast. She sensed it. With a twist of her body, she spun and kicked Arya across the stone. The young Stark hit the floor hard, coughing, blade slipping from her grasp. Daenerys raised her sword. Jon moved. He didn't think, didn't breathe. He stepped between her and Arya, catching Daenerys' wrist mid-strike. "Don't," he said softly. Her hand trembled in his grip. Her face cracked for a moment. A flicker of something, the girl in Meereen, the girl who freed the Unsullied, flashed through her. "I trusted you," she whispered. "I know," Jon said. "I wanted to believe." She pulled away. Her blade lowered, just for a second. That was all Robb needed. He lunged. The tip of his sword stopped inches from her heart. But he didn't drive it in. He couldn't. Instead, he stepped back. His sword dropped to the floor with a clatter that echoed louder than the dragon's roars. "I'm done fighting ghosts," he said. "Let the realm judge us. Not war, not fire." Daenerys stared at him, stunned. But the silence was short-lived. From the shattered ceiling above, Drogon let out a guttural, agonized scream. Something in that sound wasn't rage. It was grief. And then the sky cracked open. Arrows, dozens, flying from the city's edge, from towers and streets. Northmen, Reachmen, Vale archers, all acting without orders. They had seen the flames, heard the chaos, and they had made their choice. Drogon's scream turned into a roar of fury. The dragon dove toward the throne room. "Get out!" Jon shouted. Robb grabbed Arya's hand, pulling her to her feet. Jon turned to Daenerys, but she wasn't running. She stood in the firelight, eyes fixed on the Iron Throne, what was left of it. The metal was warped now, melting into the floor, like the bones of an empire collapsing into itself. "I crossed the world for that chair," she said. Jon stepped to her side. "Then let it die with us." She looked at him, at the man who could have loved her, who might have followed her. She closed her eyes, and Drogon came crashing down. The world exploded. Flame and wind and fire and steel. The Red Keep split in two. The throne melted completely, gone, forgotten, buried beneath the wrath of a beast. whose only queen had just given up her crown, then silence and ash, so much ash. When the smoke cleared, the Red Keep was no more, and in the crater where the throne had stood, there was no sign of Daenerys, only Jon Snow, alive. Barely. The ash fell for hours. It drifted over the ruins like snow, coating the broken stones, the blackened bones, the melted steel. King's Landing had seen death before, but never silence like this, a silence so heavy it seemed to press on the lungs. The Red Keep was gone. Just gone. A crater in the hill where kings had once ruled, where thrones were forged from. Swords and soaked in blood. Now only rubble and flame remained, and from that ruin one man emerged. Jon Snow stumbled into the daylight, his cloak tattered, face smeared with soot and blood. One arm clutched his side where a cracked rib screamed with each step. He moved, like a ghost, or maybe a man who wished he was one. Behind him the crater smoldered. There was no sign of Daenerys, no bones, no crown, no last breath, just ash. Drogon was gone too. Some said he flew east, roaring into the clouds. Others swore they saw him dive into the sea, Daenerys clutched in his talons, as if mourning her by drowning the world. But no one truly knew, and that frightened everyone more than fire ever had. Robb Stark stood on the steps of the ruined Sept of Baelor, looking down at the people gathered. Soldiers from the north, riders from the Vale, even the Reachmen who had refused to pick a side stood, now in solemn silence, waiting. They looked at him not as a king, but as a survivor. The only one who hadn't been burned or buried. Tyrion stood beside him, bruised and exhausted. Arya sat near the front, her arm in a sling, face unreadable. Jon Snow approached slowly. The crowd murmured. He stopped a few steps below Robb, his eyes sunken, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's over." Robb stared down at him. "Is it?" Jon said nothing. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like anything at all. Tyrion cleared his throat. "The Dragon Queen is gone. The Iron Throne is no more. The realm stands leaderless. And what remains of the council has questions. The lords had gathered in what was left of the dragon pit. The wind howled through the broken stone, and the smell of ash clung to their robes. Sansa arrived from the north, face hard and cold. Gendry, legitimized by royal decree before the chaos, represented the Stormlands. Samwell Tarly, quiet and heavy-hearted, sat with the Maester's scrolls in hand, and then there was Bran. He had been wheeled in under silent protest, his eyes distant, his presence unsettling. He didn't speak, but the others watched him like a priest watches a storm. They debated for hours. Who would rule? The throne was gone, but the hunger for power remained. Some pushed for Robb. Others feared he would keep the North separate forever. Some named Jon, until he admitted he had Targaryen blood, and silence fell like a blade. That scared them more than anything. "A Stark with fire in his veins," Lord Royce muttered. "That's what we just buried." Robb finally rose, and the chamber quieted. "I never wanted the crown," he said, "but I will not let this realm burn again." He turned to Sansa. "The North will remain free. That is not a question." She nodded once. "We are done kneeling." "And the rest of you?" Robb asked. "Will you keep fighting for a throne that no longer exists? Or will you build something else?" Then Sam stepped forward. "What if we choose the next ruler, not just lords, not just bloodlines, but every house, every region?" Laughter erupted. Scorn followed. But the idea lingered. They debated. They threatened. But in the end, they agreed on one thing. Westeros would never again be ruled by fire. Bran was chosen, a compromise, a mystery. A boy who had seen too much, felt too little, and promised nothing. Some thought him wise, others called him a puppet. But none could deny he was the only one who didn't want power. And maybe that was enough. Jon was banished to the Wall. though there was no longer a night's watch. He went anyway. North of the ruins, north of politics, where no dragons flew and no thrones waited. Robb returned to Winterfell, not as king, but as something quieter. He built no statues, he gave no speeches. He planted trees where his father once trained, watched over a land he nearly died trying to protect. Arya sailed west, Tyrion vanished into exile, and the realm forgot. Not all at once, but slowly. The Iron Throne became a myth. The queen who burned became a ghost, and the young wolf, the boy who nearly ruled the realm, became a story told by old men to children who didn't believe it ever happened. Years passed. The kingdom, or what was left of it, learned to breathe again, though always with a limp. The scars of fire were not just in the stone, but in the people. You could still walk the streets of King's Landing and smell the ash. No matter how many times it rained, there was no king in the north. Not anymore. Robb Stark had made sure of that. Winterfell stood stronger than ever, rebuilt stone by stone, not to awe, but to endure. The godswood flourished. Children were born in the halls again. Lords gathered not for war, but for winter festivals. But there was something different in Robb now. Something quiet, heavy. He rarely smiled, he rarely left the walls. He ruled with calm and justice. But the fire of the young wolf, the boy who had once screamed vengeance for his father, was gone, burned out in the Red Keep, along with Daenerys. Along with everything else, he visited the crypts often. There he would sit in silence before the statue of Ned Stark, and sometimes before the empty space meant for his mother. Sometimes he brought letters, sometimes just wine, but he always left. The same way, with his head bowed and his jaw clenched tight, Arya never returned. Some whispered she died at sea. Others claimed she found lands beyond Westeros, where no thrones existed and no names mattered. Robb received only one raven from her years later. A single line. "The world is wider than you ever imagined. Don't come looking for me." Jon Snow lived far beyond the wall. Those who ventured north with him returned changed. They spoke of a man who had shed his name, living among the free folk, hunting elk, sleeping beneath the stars. Some said he became one of them. Others said he was trying to forget everything. Daenerys, the fire, the blood. They said his direwolf still followed him, white as snow and silent as death. He never came back. Sansa ruled the north briefly after. Robb stepped down. She was colder, sharper, all steel beneath velvet. The north prospered under her, even as the rest of Westeros wrestled with its own future. Eventually, she named her own successor and disappeared into a keep no one spoke. Of and what of Bran, the realm did not love him. They respected him, feared him, obeyed him, but they never loved him. He ruled with no passion, no joy. His words were few, his presence unsettling. He spoke sometimes of visions, of shadows in the east, of dragons not yet born. Some called him the last king. Others whispered he was never truly a man at all anymore. Tyrion's name faded. He was seen once in the free cities, gambling with pirates and poets. Once in Dorne, drinking with exiles. Then nothing. The man who had tried to steer a mad queen, who had loved dragons and dwarves and danger, he vanished, his wit carved into books by men who never knew him. And the Iron Throne? Gone. Melted. Buried under stone and soot. A monument was built in its place, a ring of blackened swords surrounding an open garden. No throne, no crown, just a reminder of what ambition cost. Children played there now, unaware that kings had bled for that dirt. But the stories lived on. In taverns and keeps, minstrels sang of the Dragon Queen who rose from fire and vanished. In flame, of the bastard wolf who saved the realm and walked into snow, of the young king who never wore the crown he earned. But Robb's story always ended the same. He won the war and lost the reason he fought it. The wind over Winterfell always sang the same song. Cold, endless, patient. Years had passed, enough that some barely remembered the war, the dragons, or the woman who had come to save the world and nearly burned it down. The realm was quieter now, less grand perhaps, but more honest. There were no more great wars, no great kings either, just small lords ruling small lands. Westeros had become a place of rebuilding, not conquering. But in the north, the story still lingered. Robb Stark was old now. His hair had thinned, grey creeping through the brown like frost on autumn leaves. His gait slowed, and the sword that once carved through Lannister steel now sat above the hearth untouched. He rarely spoke of the past, but the past never really let him go. On the night of the first frost, Robb walked alone through the Godswood. Snow fell gently, catching in the branches, piling on the stones of the old graves. He passed the heart tree, its red leaves trembling in the stillness, and paused before a small grave under its shade. No name marked it, just a wolf carved into the stone. Small, fierce. He sat beside it as he had many nights before, his breath fogging in the cold. She was fire, he murmured, and I was ice, and in the end, neither of us was right. The leaves whispered in the wind as if answering. I thought winning would bring peace, he continued, but peace isn't something you win, it's something you build, brick by brick, word by word. He reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of parchment, yellowed, creased, torn at the edges. Arya's letter. He had read it so many times the ink had started to fade. Don't come looking for me. He folded it back slowly. Then footsteps, soft, deliberate. Sansa stood behind him, wrapped in furs, her face older, eyes wiser. She said nothing at first, just watched him. They still sing about you in the south, she said finally. The young wolf, the king who never wore his crown. Robb gave a tired smile. They should stop. The truth's less romantic. Maybe, she said. But stories last longer than bones. He looked at her, eyes sharp despite the age. Is that all we are now? Stories? Sansa's breath curled in the air. No, but stories are what the next world will remember us by. The rest turns to dust. They stood together in silence for a while, the wind brushing past them like an old ghost. Sansa eventually broke it. We're calling a council again, south of the Trident. They want you there. I'm done with councils, Robb said. I know, she replied, but they're not done with you. He didn't answer, just looked up at the heart tree, the face carved deep in its trunk, crying sap like blood. I never sat the throne, he said. Never ruled the realm, but I've buried more kings and queens than I can count. Sansa nodded. That's why they'll listen to you. Later that night, Robb sat alone by the fire. The hall was quiet now, most of his bannermen gone to sleep. He opened a chest beside the hearth and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, a broken crown, a simple circlet of iron and bronze, never worn, bent, scarred, like its owner. He held it in his lap, running his fingers across the jagged metal. In another world, he would have worn it. In this one, he had survived. He placed it back, closed the lid, and stared into the fire. Grey wind was long gone, his bones buried near the crypts. But Robb still heard him sometimes in the wind, howling not in pain, but in warning. The realm was quieter now. But peace was never forever. And Robb Stark, the boy who became a king without a crown, would be remembered not for the wars he won, nor the throne he claimed, but for the world he left behind. No thrones, no dragons, just men and women trying to build something better than what burned before. And in the north, where the snow never stopped falling, they still told the tale of the wolf who faced fire and did not kneel.